75% of black kids in California cannot read at state levels of proficiency. 50% of all kids in the public sector, public universities in California, K through 12, cannot read at state levels of proficiency. I went to Crenshaw High School. That was the school that was featured in Boys in the Hood. I just checked yesterday, 2% are math proficient. And it's a school that's dominated by the gang called the Crips. Who the hell sends their kid to a high school where only 2% are math proficient and a school that's dominated by Crips if they can get out? The majority of inner city parents, black and brown, both want choice. But they keep pulling that lever for Democrats that don't give them choice. The average price in California is 150% more than the average price in America. And according to Leo Hanian, one of the many experts that I've interviewed on my radio show over the years, he's a brilliant econ professor at UCLA. He says houses in California are 50% more than they would be but for the environmental laws and the extremists that have been using them to stop construction of housing, which is why we have a housing shortage, and which is why so many young people are leaving California and going to places like Tennessee and Florida. And Texas. There's a magazine, Dave, called CEO magazine. Don't know if you're familiar with it. They've been around 17 years. And based upon things like taxes, spending, unfunded pension liabilities, the power of public sector unions, and the degree to which the business climate is friendly or not friendly, California has been rated number 50 of all 50 states for the entire 17 years CEO magazine has been published. It is outrageous. And this guy is doing nothing at all about it.
Okay, so that story starts, however, with your dad coming out here because things were better out here. What went wrong here, and when did it get wrong? And did something snap, you think, in the last 2 years because of lockdown that really pushed it over the edge?
Well, yeah, to answer the latter part of your question, it was a lockdown because of the way Gavin Newsom imposed these mandates against science and the way the teachers union kept getting paid while telling kids not to go back to in-school learning, even after the CDC said it was okay. 75% of black kids in California cannot read at state levels of proficiency. 50% of all kids in the public sector, public universities in California, K through 12, cannot read at state levels of proficiency. I went to Crenshaw High School. That was the school that was featured in Boys in the Hood. I just checked yesterday, 2% are math proficient. And it's a school that's dominated by the gang called the Crips. Who the hell sends their kid to a high school where only 2% are math proficient and a school that's dominated by Crips if they can get out? The majority of inner city parents, black and brown, both want choice. But they keep pulling that lever for Democrats that don't give them choice. Explain that to me. And when I've talked to black media, and I just did that the other day in Sacramento, I said, aren't you tired? Aren't you tired of the fact that 75% of black kids cannot read at state level of proficiency? Aren't you tired of the fact that an LAUSD teacher, Los Angeles Unified Public School teacher, who has school-age kids, is twice as likely as non-teaching families to put their own kids in private school? 44% of Philadelphia public school teachers, Dave, with school-age kids have their own kids in private school, as opposed to 10% of families nationwide, 6% of black families nationwide. It's the equivalent of opening up a restaurant, putting up a sign and saying, come on in, just don't eat the food. I mean, what are we talking about here? I said, aren't you tired of this? Aren't you tired of bad-mouthing the cops? And the cops are pulling back? And the people who are hurt are the very same people that the left claims that they care about? Aren't you tired of this?
So what is that disconnect? I mean, I asked this to basically all my guests at this point. What is the disconnect between voting lefty policies and then not understanding that it's those policies that are doing all the damage?
Because people, by and large, are not policy wonks like you and I are. They're not looking at this. They're working.
Yeah.
They're trying to put food on the table. So people leave and go to Oregon, they go to places, and all of a sudden those states become more left-wing. And they bring their policies with them because they haven't connected the dots. There's a reason why houses are so high. It's called CEQA, the California Quality Environmental Act, that basically stops any project for any reason for almost an indefinite period of time. In preparing for this race, I talked to a lot of developers and contractors. And the stories they told me, Larry, I had a 2,000 home development project all ready to roll. I got sued. I cut it down to 1,000. I got sued. I cut it down to 500. I got sued. Now it's 200 homes 22 years later. I talked to one guy who made all of his money buying gas stations. And when I say talk to, I'm on the phone trying to raise money. 75% of being a politician is raising money. And I call him and I introduce myself. I said, my name's Larry Yoder. He goes, who? Didn't know who I was. I'm on radio 30 years in California. In every major market, didn't know who I was. Pretty ego settling.
Got a couple of viral videos with that Dave Rubin guy.
Tell me about it. He didn't know who you were either. And I said, haven't you seen me on Dave Rubin? He goes, who? And I said, one of the things I'm going to do when I become governor is I'm going to call a state emergency and I'm going to suspend CEQA. And he goes, what's your name? CEQA was suspended for the construction of the Sacramento King Stadium up in Sacramento. For a billionaire, somehow they waive CEQA, but for people that want to build houses. So the average person leaving California doesn't realize that stopping construction, of course, means that there's going to be a surplus, a deficit of homes. Economics 101, supply and demand, and as a result, fewer supply, the demand goes up, and the prices go up. So young people can't get that starter home the way my father was able to do with an 8th grade education, and people are leaving. They don't understand the connection between the declining public schools and the fact that you literally cannot fire a teacher. Derek Chauvin, by the way, however you feel about how that trial turned out, had about 15 serious complaints against him. They couldn't get rid of him. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the teachers. There are 300,000 public school teachers in the state of California. I am told by experts that between 5 and 7% of them are incompetent, which means a minimum of 15,000 need to be fired. You know how many were fired last year? Two. And took millions of dollars for that to happen. And they end up in the worst schools. I subscribe to Spectrum Cable. It used to irritate me how it defaults to the LA Times channel.
I swear to you, that's why I got rid of cable. Because they would, every time you turn on the box, it would send you to their channel.
What you had the night before, it's there. But after you're sitting there, you're captive, and every now and then I'm watching this stuff, and when I decided to run for office, it's local, so I wanted to get more into local issues. And the other day, 2 or 3 days ago, there's this black woman who started her own school, and it turns out 2/3 of black parents do not want to send their kids back to LAUSD. They've seen how bad the education was because they were able to watch it online, and they are ticked off. And they believe there is systemic racism, but not the normal kind of systemic racism, because most of the teachers and the administrators are black.
Right.
They believe the worst teachers and the worst administrators end up in the inner city schools where they need the best teachers and the best administrators, and they believe that's systemic racism. So they want out. I'm the one that wants to give you out. But I'm an Uncle Tom and I'm a sellout? Think about it. Connect the dots.
All right,
There's a reason for this.
Okay, so on the dots, I think, in terms of the zeitgeist of America, have been being connected. Because you've been talking about the family stuff forever, and that you got to stop throwing money at all these things. There do seem to be more red-pilled former lefties like me that perhaps because of the video that you and I did where you beat me senseless, and everyone's seen it already, but people woke up.
Right.
So in that regard, are you feeling hopeful that maybe in pockets of, say, the black community that weren't open to these ideas, that it is working?
I am absolutely hopeful. I believe I can explain things in ways that Joe and Joe Sixpack can get. Again, it's not because they're stupid, it's because they're working. They're putting food on the table. They're trying to get that first starter home. But they don't realize there's a connection between this and all the problems that they're complaining about. We talked about homelessness. What does Gavin Newsom and the Democrats want to do about homelessness? Build homes for the homeless at a cost 3, 4, 5 times than what the private sector could do, A, and B, not dealing with the underlying problem why they're homeless in the first place. So even if they were able to get up and go to the homes, they wouldn't stay.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you're sending a signal to the other states, cold weather climates. I can go to California where the weather is nice, people are going to treat me humanely, and I get a free home. Come on down. And that's what's happening. I talked to cops who tell me that many people on Skid Row aren't even from here.
Yeah. No, we know that they're coming now. So when you see that places like Venice, Venice Beach was the coolest, gorgeous place, all in
trendy, bohemian.
It's a disaster right now. Drugs everywhere.
Right. Needles everywhere. And one of the reasons is because of Proposition 47 that the voters in California foolishly voted for, which meant that if you still at 950 or less, by the way, you can do it every day.
Yeah.
You're not going to go to jail because you'll be committing a misdemeanor, and if they catch you, they'll give you a ticket. The whole point was, and it was a legitimate point, was to get people in treatment because many people who are stealing to support their meth habit. But you take away the stick of going to jail, there's no reason to go to rehab. So the cops are saying, get up and go to rehab. F you, why should I go? What are you going to do to me? Nothing.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.